Hello and welcome. This is Laren with the Fantasy Grounds Academy. Today I'm going to be checking out the Drow NPCs. Going to be doing a little bit of custom work on there. One of the things I wanted to point out during this particular stream is that quite often when you use NPCs straight out of the monster manual or from another source, they are incomplete or they are kind of lacking in detail. So I want to talk to you about that and show you some things that I've done to help speed things along depending on your encounter, what your needs are. But generally, you get the bare minimum and maybe a couple other details with some of the NPCs that you get when you buy a source book. But when I was looking through the Drow in particular, I was going through and it's going to assign them with unique tokens, which are stuff I've got from commission work. I got these a few years ago from Bernardo Hasselmann. He's a pretty decent token creator. He hasn't been active that much lately, but I'll put that in the description at the end of the video. But essentially, I'm just testing out some NPCs. So I have some things here that I wanted to show you that could be helpful depending on what you're trying to do. So I made a Drow Assassin NPC. I imported it from D&D Beyond using the NPC import tool in Fantasy Grounds. And I was going through here, and on the other tab, you'll notice it's nice and laid out. This is the new formatting that you'll get if you use the import tool when you're creating content with Fantasy Grounds. Some of the older content doesn't quite have this much detailed, or this area here that has this nice layout and has all the content listed kind of like in a book format. But what I'm going to talk to you about is the fact that the description says trained in the use of poison, assassins are remorseless killers who work for nobles, guild masters, sovereigns, and anyone else who can afford them. So this is for a Drow assassin. So I'm looking down the character sheet here to look over his stuff. Looks pretty good. I notice her languages. They got Fey ancestry. They have the Drow innate spell casting. They have other things in here as well, like sunlight sensitivity, assassinate, evasion, and sneak attack, but I didn't see anything about poisons. So I think when you're using an NPC that has some sort of poison, you might want to add that to the NPC stat block to make it more convenient for you, because if you don't have this there, you're going to have to dig around in the middle of the game to figure it out. So this is something that you can do in between sessions, or if you want to go through like all your main NPCs and make sure they have everything you're going to need for the adventure. So what I did is I looked up Drow Poison from the adventuring gear, and that's in the items section. So this assumes that you already have a license, that you have some content. So I went and searched for poison, and I found a version of it in here from the Dungeon Master's Guide. So what I did is I made a copy of it just by dragging it out and then back in. So basically it just duplicates this entry, and that makes it so you can edit it. So now I can unlock it, whereas before it's read only. So all you have to do is come up to an item, take the little shortcut on the top left, drag it back into the list, and it will make a copy for you. And the reason I did this is so I can edit it. So I come back through here and I go, oh, okay, here's what it says. So I just copied all this text and I pasted it in the NPC record, which I made a copy of. And then I just, in this case, I actually did a import. And then I added this as a trait so that when I need it during combat or during play, it's right there. You can't parse it from an item, so it's going to be parsed, in this case, from the actual NPC stat block. Now, this is not normally on most of the stat blocks, but if you ever need to poison, just put in the statement that they need a saving throw if applicable, or they'll be poisoned for 1 hour. And then if the saving throw fails by 5 or more, the creature is also unconscious. So you can have this set on the combat tracker when you add these to the combat tracker. So I'm going to add the assassin. And then when you go to the offense part, which is this little sword as the GM, you can see that you have all these different things here. So one of them is going to be poison, hopefully. Yeah, Drow poison right here. So here's the saving throw, here's the effect. So this is just something that you should probably take in consideration if you are going to be using more of a complex character. So this is just one thing I did to kind of help speed things up, because when you're in the middle of a game, it's kind of a hassle to have to go look this up, and then you get the item, and then you're like, oh, well, you can't really do much with the item on an NPC record. On a player character sheet, you can probably make this into an effect. You can also use a basic poison effect, but it's nice to have it right there, handy, right on the sheet, so that it will actually transfer over, so you can apply this to one of your enemies or whoever you're attacking at the time. So this is one thing I noticed that, that really kind of stood out that might need to happen. So then I'm going through and I'm looking at the standard Drow. So the standard Drow description is kind of like the generic form of a Drow NPC, and it has all of this extra stuff in here. There's quite a bit of information here, which applies to most of the NPCs. So I don't know why this information isn't repeated on every NPC entry, or at least condensed down into like a general description. But nonetheless, I made sure this was on there, including this little bit here about their lore and story. And I was thinking about adding these to the other character NPCs or sheets, but you don't really need to if you already know what the Drow are like. You can also take this information. If you make a copy of your NPC, you can copy all this information into a story entry so that you have it at your fingertips somewhere else, and you have that ready to go if you're unfamiliar with the Drow, or you want to know more about them. And then there's a statement here about the Drow magic and armor weapons, where it says that they wear magic armor and carry magic weapons that lose their enhancement bonus permanently if they're exposed to sunlight for an hour or longer. And then it says a Drow wearing +1 chain and carrying a +1 short sword has a 19 AC and a +1 on damage with damage rolls with the short sword attacks. A Drow elite wearing +2 leather and carrying a +2 short sword has an AC of 20 and +2 on bonus attack and damage rolls. And then a Drow priestess of Lolth wears a +3 scale mail and has an AC of 13. So these notes are kind of embedded into the standard description of a Drow. But when you actually go to an elite warrior, it doesn't have that adjustment in there. So I mean, I don't, this is the sort of thing that you're gonna see here when you're working on this. So here's the weapon. It's saying that it doesn't tell you what melee weapon, but up here it says the Drow makes 2 short sword attacks. So if I bring up that other Drow, and according to these notes here, which is from the player's handbook, it says that a Drow wearing +1 chain shirt would get that. So this is not even the correct AC here. So this should be a 19. If this is a Drow elite, or basically a variant, this should have that. Now I know that they have a Drow variant in the NPC stat block. So if you actually search for one and you have enough content in there, there is a Drow variant, I believe, that has those adjustments. So I'm going to look at that. Let's see, this is Elite. Yeah, so here's the Drow Elite Warrior. So this one is a little closer, but nonetheless, it's really not any different. I mean, there's no adjustments or anything really made for any of that as far as the weapon attacks and stuff, because when you go and look at the mechanics of it, if there's any associated with it, none of this stuff adds up to what this is saying here. So it says they often wear magic armor and carry magic weapons. So it doesn't mean always, but if you just wanted a standard Drow, you just use a standard Drow. If you want to use an elite warrior, other than having more hit points and a higher proficiency bonus, it would be nice if they had the actual variation. And this is variant here. So it'd be nice if this was actually a part of that. So I would go in and make these adjustments, knowing that you could have a little bit better, a little bit more tough NPC. So I'm going to change that to 19 up here on the armor class, and instead of studded leather, we're gonna notate the +1 chainmail, and it's probably mithril. I mean, more than likely. So it'll be chainmail plus 1. So plus 1 chainmail. And then it has a shield, which is fine. I'll leave the hit points. And then it says if they're wearing the shirt, yep, 19, and they get a bonus on damage and attack rolls, or they can have a +2 studded leather and carrying 2 short swords. Has an armor class of 20 and a +2. So there's 2 variations. So this drow is the common one, and this variation down here is actually the one that I'm working on. So I'm not sure why these adjustments weren't added or considered when they made this. So actually I'm going to change that to +2 studded leather, not chainmail, because that would be a regular drow. So this is what I mean. If you're going to have the variations, I don't know why those are not included in the stat block, but nonetheless, these are the sort of things you might want to change before your prep, and it makes this a lot easier because you can actually manually just add the +2 down here when you make your rolls and such, but it becomes very much of a burden if you're having to do that every time you're using these. So I just went ahead and changed the armor class to 20 according to this down here, and then it's carrying a +2 short sword as a +2 bonus on attacks and damage. So with this is if you're going to do a strength base or even a dex base, that's +4, and then if you add that, that's +6 to hit already. And then this is saying that they get a +7, which sounds like it's about right, but you have a +3 proficiency bonus too. So I don't know exactly how they figure this stuff out, but this does not jive with what you would think. So if you have a drow that's +3 proficiency bonus, you calculate their base attack roll and such. But this seems like it's a little bit on the weak side. Maybe it's supposed to be +8, but nonetheless, it just seems like a lot of this stuff is kind of missing. So that's why I'm kind of mentioning that you can actually go in and make some minor adjustments, but you have to make a copy of it first, and then you crack it open and make your adjustments accordingly. So I'm at least going to know that this guy's going to have a little bit better armor class. And what else does it say? Yeah, so he gets a +2 bonus on attacks and damage with the short blades. So he gets 2 extra. He gets 2 attacks, by the way. This is a multi-attack. So you get +2, and then he gets +4 for his dex bonus. So that's 6 right there. And then there must be a +1 for his proficiency bonus or something like that. So, or maybe it's the drow training or whatever. But this is pretty close to where you want to be as far as that goes. So there's one adjustment. I just changed the armor class. Now this assumes that they have access to it, and not every single variant is going to have that. But you would think that, what's the difference between a elite warrior and one that isn't, other than a proficiency bonus, more hit points? I mean, is that the only difference? So that seems a little bit incomplete as far as I'm concerned, anyways. So the Drow Mage, I was going through this, and I noticed at the bottom they have the ability to summon a Quasit, or you can attempt to summon a Shadow Demon with 50% chance of success. So I know darn well that during combat, when you're in the middle of that, I'm going to drag this this Drow Mage in here. So when you go to the offense part of this, and you look at some of the content that it has, I don't really see anything under Summon Demon other than just the title. So this doesn't help you at all in Fantasy Grounds. It just tells you can do it, and it tells you the duration, that sort of thing. So it'd be handy if you actually had the spell or the effect, which would expire after an hour or whatever it says. So this says a day. So the combat tracker doesn't really keep track of days. It's always in rounds. So if you really wanted to keep track of it, you know, because you're probably going to rest in between there anyways, but if you really wanted to, it says it remains for 10 minutes. So you want to convert that into rounds, essentially. And then as far as the you know, the actual spell itself, it would be nice if they had the encounter ready to go, so you don't have to sit there and do this manually. So what I did is down here at the bottom, where they can actually summon these creatures, I went ahead and made an encounter for each one. So there's a Quasit, and then there's the Shadow Demon. So when you need to use these, you just hit the down arrow, and it adds it to the combat tracker, and then you would just, if depending if you were the PC or not, you could change it to friendly or neutral or whatever. But in this case, I would just leave it as neutral, and that way when it's summoned, you know, it's kind of got a neutral disposition, and then it depends on if you attack it or not and that sort of thing, or how it's being told to interact with the enemy. So this is just a quicker way to get things on the combat tracker without having to manually go and look for it in the player's handbook or the monster manual and drag it onto the combat tracker. And then if your players actually defeat it, you don't have an encounter set up, so you have to manually award the experience points. So that's, you know, these are the sort of things that kind of slow combat down. So I went ahead and made these encounters and then added those there. So when he actually does summon something, it's ready to go. And it's something that, you know, basically that you would have to come across. And then you can actually probably put a duration on. You can probably make an effect that just adds a duration, or you can just add it manually to the Drow mage, keep track of how many minutes have gone by. But generally 10 minutes is probably not going to get past that point. But there again, it's just a matter of your needs and how detailed you want to be. So some of these things might be a little over the top where it's probably unnecessary, but nonetheless, if you have a summoner or some kind of NPC that actually has these type of abilities, it's nice when you have an encounter of the actual content. So if you have a druid that has summoned woodland beings, you'd like to have a little list of things so that they can summon, make it a lot easier than trying to dig through and finding all that stuff during gameplay. So even though it states it here, it doesn't even tell you what page number it was on. So I mean, there's just little things like that really kind of make things tough. So I would actually, if you have one source, because the Quasits might be in other books, but at least put it, you know, in terms of the monster manual. So if they're in the monster manual, put the page number in there, so at least we can find it a little quicker, or at least a chapter or something, because that's for the NPCs, it's pretty much alphabetical order, but it would be nice if they actually had the page number or some sort of reference, and then the actual encounter, because that's where things get really slowed down, is when you have those sort of things. So same thing with the priestess. She has the encounter where she can basically summon a really powerful demon. This is a Yoklo. So she can summon this once per day. It lasts for 10 minutes until it dies or she dismisses it. So again, I made another encounter, and then when you're ready, you just pop that link up, hit the down arrow, it's on the combat tracker, ready to go. Otherwise, you're going to be digging through the manual looking for that, and then just dragging it over to the combat tracker, which isn't a big deal. But when you're done, if the players do actually defeat the yokel, you'll have to manually award the encounter, or go in and build the encounter after the fact and award it through the party sheet. So it's nice to already have these summons ready to go on the back, or the other tab is on your NPCs. So this is something that really slows gameplay down when you have that sort of incompleteness. This is not the fault of Smiteworks or of the the D&D content. It's just how it's given to you. And it's kind of up to the GM to make these adjustments, and that's something that you can do in Fantasy Grounds or whatever virtual tabletop platform you're in to make your game a lot smoother. And that's kind of why I'm showing you this, because it can really be a bear if you have summoners, or if you have the like little companions and such. So those can really make for a tough day, if depending on what you're doing during combat. So this is going to help speed things up if you have these kind of complex encounters. So the summon once per day type thing is just a kind of a note. It doesn't give you anything in regards to what you're going to need for Fantasy Grounds. It'd be nice if this can be edited and you put the actual summon demon trait if you can actually link it in there, but it doesn't allow for that. So this is just a kind of a preliminary thing, and then once you have all of your stuff, then you all your edits and changes that you want to make, then you want to come back and check this stuff. So I'm going to bring all of these different edits and all the different NPCs that I've kind of put together just to make life a little easier. I also changed the tokens a little, so there's that. And then here's the elite guy I was telling you about. Here's the Drow assassin, regular Drow. We'll need a couple of those. And then the summons I won't bring out yet. And then here's the item where I just made a copy of that poison just in case. I unlocked it. I did copy and paste and made a trait on the NPC record for the assassin, so that it's easier for you to apply the poison while you're in combat, so that's something that may come up. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go bring up a map of some sort. So I do have some pretty decent map packs that I've ordered or collected over the years. So I'd like to use one of those. So I'm going to go to my assets, and then I want to actually check out some Underdark stuff, maybe like just kind of maps so I can play around with the NPCs. And then I also have a module that has some Underdark stuff. So I'm going to search for Underdark in my content here. I'm pretty sure I have something like that, an Underdark map. It probably doesn't have line of sight on there. So hit Underdark in here, hit enter. Yeah, so here's some treasure. Here's an almanac, creatures of the Underdark. I'm going to load that just in case. I want to see what that looks like. I think that's a Grim Press product. And then I want to grab and take the, I'm going to go with a Meanders map pack because I know those have it. So there's that. Let's see if we can do the vaults. The under vaults is what I want to get. Because that actually has some of the, there we go. So the Under Vaults is a map pack that you can get on the Fantasy Grounds store. It's also Chris from Game Tile Warehouse. What I like about his content is they're all labeled pretty well, and they all have a pretty well laid out structure. And then there's a map selection panel where basically you can come through here and pick which map you want without having to go through and look at every single list item. I wish more modules would do this because this is easier to get to find out what content you have before you go and dig through every image, especially if you're running off the seat of your pants with a homebrew type thing and you don't really know what you have. It's nice to have this preview image so you can get straight to it. So this is like a Drow type map with a throne. So I'll go ahead and open that up, and it looks pretty nice. I like it. And I'm going to go ahead and stretch this out and see what we have. So yeah, it looks pretty nice. So I'm going to unlock it and right click, go to view, and then zoom to fit. So I can kind of get the map fitted to the space that I need without covering everything else. So that's one of the things I practice to do, is that I will put this stuff in a certain way so it's not in the way every time I need it. So this is why I'm sizing this, and I'm going to collapse the sidebar a little bit so I have a little bit more room. There we go. So that's a lot better. And then this thing here, these notes that I have, I want to take these and I'm going to link the map to it so I don't have to come looking for it again. So I will put another section on here just so I have a group here, and that way I can link it all together. I don't have to go looking for everything. It's all in one place. So this is just a way to organize your content. So here's the thing, maps, and then I'm going to drag and drop this link down here. So this way I don't have to go looking for it. you know, again, that's what takes so much time. And then I have this link down here on the bottom. So if I accidentally close all this stuff, I can bring it back up with the story entry that I've made, and then I can click on the map link and that brings that up. Same thing with the NPCs. I can bring those up just by clicking on these links here, and I've had them all stacked up on this list over here, so it's easier to get to them. And this way, when you're playing, you're not looking for stuff and you're just, you know, constantly shuffling through the interface. All right, so here's this. I want to see if what it has. Does it have a grid on it even? So 50 by 50, let's see what we got here. Yeah, so the grid's lined up pretty well. I like that. And I don't really like this washed out gray color. It's really hard to see, the white. So I'm going to go to like a yellow. So I'm going to come over here to the tile color picker and let me go to like a yellowish color. Maybe turn it up just a hair. Not too bright, but just enough so I can see it. So that kind of helps with the visibility of the grid. It is a little obnoxious, but it's not too bad. I can always turn it down or turn it off completely. So now that I have that, I want to make all of these NPCs, I'm going to make those visible. So all those visible. I can drag these all as a group instead of one at a time. So I can take this hostile faction down at the bottom here, drag and drop it onto this record here, and then you have like a little group here that you could select from. So why do I have two of those? So Priestess of Lolth, what does she have? So I don't, okay, so I'm going to put her next to the throne. And you got to be in play mode in order to interact with these tokens. So that's a pretty big throne, but I'm going to go ahead and fill the shoes here. So that's that. And there's two guards. So there's one here, and I'll make those a little bigger. And then I have the Drow Elite Warrior, will be up here. Here is the House Mage, put him over here. And Personal Assassin right there. So this is all the different things that I was working on. So I kind of have a little contingent here of Drow warriors and such. So now we can put a little bit of line of sight on here. It doesn't need a lot because this is probably just a raised kind of railing type thing. So what I might do with this is put like glass right here. So basically they can still see it, but they can't go in there, or I can actually put a wall there if I want. Now let's go ahead and put a wall. So I'm going to go to the line of sight tool and go to the wall tool and then click the line tool and then just come through here, left click and drag. I think I'm going to just do the whole outside first. So that's going to be like this. So that's going to enclose this area pretty much. And then I'm going to take and go to the line tool and just come through and do the line work for part of this. So I just come out here and click, and then click there, and just kind of go through. And as you can see, I'm not really too worried about being 100% accurate. I mean, it is what it is. I'm not going to worry too much. You can see I got these extra tails. So I don't worry about that too much. I just come through here, get all the line work in there first, and then come back and clean it up later. So there's that. I think this part was going to be more of a railing type thing. So what I'll do with that is I'll use a glass window. So it just means that they can't walk through it. So they can still see, but they can't walk through. So that's just a good way to kind of make that happen. And the same thing with this railing. I'll just make this glass so we can still see through it. So these are stairs that go up, and then there's railings here, and then on these are actually walls. Now I'm going to go through and clean this up. So I'm going to use my selection tool, and I'm just going to come out here and left click and drag in this with the selection tool, and then hit the delete key, or you can say to remove the selected points. I'm just going to hit delete, and that gets rid of those extra little standoffs there, and I'm gonna do the same thing here. And then for all these openings, I'm just gonna use the door tool and the rectangle tool and just come in here and just grab this and come through here and make these doors, just in case you want them to go to other maps or other tiles. So those will go out like that. I'm just going to come through and do those, because these were meant to connect to other maps. So I'm going to set that up just in case. I don't really need to, so it's just a single map, but I don't want to have to come back later and decide I have to do this. Okay, so there's that. And this. And then what we might do on the chair is, even though the chair is probably not that, that big, it's still, I'm going to go back up here. If she's sitting in the chair, and if it's really that huge, it looks kind of like a spider, I guess. What I'll do is around this edge part, I'll make a shadow caster. So it's really not going to make a wall. It's not going to make a terrain or anything. I'm just going to do a shadow caster. So if there's any light put on it, it'll cast shadow. So here's what I'll do. I'll go ahead and go to the line of sight tool. And here's a shadow caster. See, but it only works with daylight, so it's really not going to be very helpful. So I guess I will put terrain on this, just on the back part of this, on the seat here, and then use the little line tool here and just kind of make like a kind of a half square here. Yeah, this is really basic. It's nothing special. And then what I'll do is I'll adjust it. So if I don't like where I put the lines, I can always move them. So kind of move this one back a little bit. Move this thing up here. Let's say you didn't want this line right here, this little point. You can actually select that and ask to remove it, and it'll get rid of that. So there's just a preliminary thing. So there's the back of the chair. Maybe it might be really high and you can't see the top of her head or something like that, but there's very rare that you would need to do that. So now that I have that in there, now I want to put the lighting on the actual torches or the braziers. So I'm going to come over to the lighting tool, and I want to add, so I want to make sure they're on a separate layer. So I clicked away from any of these. And then I want to go ahead and go to the, let's see. So I want to go to lighting, and then I'm going to drop this down to probably to torch. And then click on these, each one of these cells where the torches are, and that will help light up the area. Don't think there's any more. Nope. So that's that. Now let's see what it looks like when we add the line of sight in here. So yeah, it looks pretty good. So here's the interior with all the NPCs. Here's the stairwells, and then again, here's the walls. So I'm going to grab one of these NPCs and see what it looks like. So I need to make sure I'm in play mode. I'm going to go ahead and lock the map just in case. And then I could take the Drow Warrior and kind of move around. They also have dark vision, so the torchlight is probably not even necessary. So I can turn those off just to see what that looks like. So if I unlock the map, and I come over here to lights, and I turn off the lights, this is what the Drow would see, is this black and white. So that's what their vision looks like. So that we know that that's working. But when I turn the lighting back on it, you can see it in color. So here is just an area where the priestess is. This is just so you can't move into here right away. And all you have to do is toggle it so it's open. So if a player was to sneak up on them or something, you can open that up. But there is just ways to kind of corral people so they don't go through walls and such. So like this makes it a little harder to just go through that area. So that's why I put the glass there. All right, so that's just a kind of a preliminary thing. And then when I come over here, I want to check all the NPC stuff here, make sure that it's correct. So I'm going to go to the offense, for each one of the NPCs and take a look, make sure all the actions are parsing correctly, because that's another way to check it. Once you put it on the combat tracker, you should have access to those if they are codable or if they have, parsing information. So here's all the spells. Looks pretty good so far. And here's the 2 Drow warriors, guards. Okay, so that's basically looks pretty good. So I said I just added a map, just kind of see how things interact and how they're looking. It looks okay. I don't know if I'm happy with the glass here, but it is what it is. Let me see what I did here. So I'm not sure if I like it like this. That's not what I had in mind. Yeah, that's because I didn't put a double. In this case, I'd probably put a double line in here to make it more of a square instead of, yeah, so that's why it turned out that way, because it's just a single line. Oh well. And like I said, this thing right here, if I want to get rid of that point, if I don't want that here, I can just single click and have it remove that point. So you can go back and clean up your lines after you've made a majority of them. So yeah, this didn't turn out exactly the way I wanted it to. So what I'm going to do is if you want to get rid of something, you can double click on this line here and it'll get rid of that first line. And I'll double click here and double click here. Or I could have highlighted all that stuff and then hit that delete. So what I want to do actually is just make this one solid piece of glass. I'm not sure why this is still here. Let me see if I can get there we go. It just didn't refresh. Okay, so to make this work a little better, what I'm going to do is go back to the glass tool, which is in the wall, line of sight wall, and then I'm going to go and grab the window tool and just use the line tool and just kind of come through and do this instead of just a single line, because this will make it to where it's enclosed and it's all one big piece instead of individual lines. So this will help with that weirdness that I had earlier. So all I'm doing is kind of making this one solid piece. So let's see what that looks like with line of sight and all that on there. Yeah, that's way better. So this is just to keep them from going through the wall, essentially. They can still see, and if they jump over the wall or something, you can open this up. So that's a good thing. So another thing is if you need to move, let's say this Drow, you want to move him across the map, instead of going all the way around like this, because that's what will happen, you won't be able to go through. But if you're the GM, you can hold the shift key and drag them anywhere you want without worrying about the walls. So that's very helpful to know that if you're using a map, is when you click on a token, if you need to move it somewhere, or like when you're adjusting your maps, just hold the shift key and that will bypass the occluders. Otherwise, you're going to get stuck on the walls. This is also a good thing to know if your players are moving around the map and they happen to move into a spot that's really tight and they can't get out. Just hold down the shift key and kind of move them aside. That's the best way to get through that. Otherwise, it's going to take you, forever to go around the whole map. And then the other thing you can do to help ensure that players actually stay in the grid, because a lot of times the players will put their token halfway on, halfway off, or they'll do something like that. So for a large token or character, that's okay if you have a large that takes 4 squares. But when you have a single token, you want it to be in a square when they end their turn. And you can use the arrow key. So if you highlight one of the tokens, you can use the arrow keys. This is helpful also if you have a Mac and you don't have like a middle mouse button or something like that. This will help. So you select the token and then you use the arrow keys to move. And if you need to move diagonally, you just hit both of them at the same time and they'll kind of move it like that. So that's kind of a cool thing to know. So that'll make sure that it stays in the actual square and it's not moving around. So as the game master, if I want to know how far the players are moving, I want to make sure that the token movement is locked, which it is in this case. I have to hold the Alt key down to initiate the movement. Once I do that, then I can essentially just go through and move it with the token movement on, so we can keep track of how far he moves. So there's 25 feet. There's 30. So it keeps track of the actual distance if you need to do that. And that way you can tell how far they moved, if it's within whatever your movement setup is, and then approve it and they'll move. So if you just want them to move around freely, you don't want to mess with that, you can just unlock the movement. You just move them wherever you want. So but that also applies to the players too. So it might drive you nuts during combat. Sometimes during exploration, I'll unlock it, but the problem is that they want to go like way off the map just to look around ahead of time. So that's why the lock feature's on there. Otherwise, who cares? All right, so I think that's about it. I kind of went through some NPCs, doctored them up a little bit, actually gave them some stuff to kind of make that happen. Like if one of these higher level spellcasters actually casts a spell, it'll make it easier for me to manage that. So if like the priestess wanted to summon one of those NPCs, so again, if you lose your map and you don't know where the map is, just double click on your token and that'll bring up the last map you were on. So here's the Priestess of Lolth. So if I come down to her sheet and I go over to the Priestess of Lolth and I bring up her stat block, I already have it set up. So if I come to the back sheet, that's the encounter. So I'm going to have that player roll a percentage. If it's 30 or below, they are successful. So that's a 44%. So she wouldn't be able to, so that's one of her turns. Once per day. So she blew her opportunity. Let's see if, I'll just try again and see if it happens on the next roll. Nope, 51. So it's not a very likely to happen. It's 30% out of 100. So, it's kind of a difficult task, but nonetheless, if she did make it successfully, the roll, I can just add this creature to the combat tracker, drag it onto the map, and then when it's time, I can unveil it, and it'll be ready to attack. So there we go. All right, so that's nice when you have the summoning, and then when it comes to the poison, let's say this Drow elite was going to attack the yokel for some reason. Maybe it got out of hand. So this Drow elite warrior, we'll say it's his turn. He's going to make an attack with his short blades. He gets 2 attacks, so I'll drag this on here once. And that's a complete miss. He rolled a 2 with a total of 9. And then the second attack, maybe this one will be a little better. So this one actually hit. He does have, supposed to be a magic weapon, but we'll go ahead and roll damage on here. This one has the poison built into the attack, which is kind of nice. So rolls that, and it partially resisted, but it still took some damage. So that's just nice to have. But if you wanted to use like the assassin, you'd have to have that included. So this one does, the mage does, and let me see if the assassin does. So most of them have the poison built into the attack. But the only thing I don't like about that is that you may not want to use poison every time you attack. Yeah, this has a really high poison damage. So the poison is actually built into the attack or the damage roll. So there are possibilities that maybe the poison wears off or something like that. So it's just a matter of what your preferences are. But in this case, that would have worked with poison. But I think the yokel actually was able to get by it. Well, anyways, I will get going. You guys enjoy the rest of your weekend. I'll see you around, and hopefully you guys can play. If you guys need some help with Fantasy Grounds, you know where to find us at Fantasy Grounds Academy. We'll help inspire you and hopefully get you going. And I'm doing a class Tuesday for the map tools. So if you're a little bit shy or weary of using the map tools, that class will do you some good. Also, if you don't want all this fancy line of sight and stuff, you can actually go in and just add a mask to it. And this is a global mask. So what it does is when you use it, you just you can just reveal the areas as needed and don't worry about all that lighting stuff. So there's different ways that you can use the maps. And when you want to redo it, you hold down Shift, I think. Yeah, Shift will remask it. So this is just a thing you can do. And then if you want to remove the mask, you can just disable it. So that's something you can do as well. So if you don't want to use all that, that mess of trying to figure out the line of sight and see if it's working right and all that stuff, just use a mask. It's not going to hurt anything. All right, guys, take care.